The excavator bucket swings wide and kisses a brand new aluminum sign that reads, "Community Property," folding it like a cheap lawn chair. The metal screeches and buckles, and neighbors gasp from their driveways like they are watching a car accident in slow motion. A woman in a sash that literally says HOA, President, in glittery letters, shrieks at the top of her lungs that I am stealing the commons. Her voice carries across 3 yards and probably wakes up anyone who had the audacity to sleep past 8 on a Saturday. Behind her, my concrete truck idles like a very patient rhinoceros, the driver scrolling through his phone with the calm of a man who has seen every flavor of neighborhood drama. The foreman checks his watch and raises an eyebrow at me. I give him a thumbs up. Wet slab waits for no committee meeting, and I have waited long enough. My name is Nolan Grady. I work in contract documentation by day, which means I spend 40 hours a week making sure every comma and clause is exactly where it belongs. I spend my evenings doing crosswords and enjoying the quiet, maybe a beer on the porch if the weather is nice. I am not a complicated man. 6 months ago, I bought Lot 19 in Sycamore Vale, an empty rectangle of land with 2 mature oak trees, and a view of people arguing about mailbox fonts at the monthly meetings I never attended. The price was fair. The title was clear, and I had plans to build a modest 1-story home with a porch swing and a garage, big enough for my tools and maybe a workbench. Simple, reasonable, mine. Enter Charlene Wexler, HOA president, and a woman who believes clipboards are a personality trait. She is the kind of person who color codes her grocery lists and irons her jeans. She runs the neighborhood board like a petty navy, complete with flares, flags, and a whistle she blows whenever someone's grass gets what she calls up, which apparently means anything over 3 in. She has opinions about fence stain colors, mailbox heights, and whether decorative rocks count as landscaping or clutter. My plan was to build quietly, follow the rules, and mind my own business. Her plan, apparently, was manifest destiny with cul-de-sacs and matching shutters. The week my building permits cleared from the city, a sign sprouted on my lot overnight like a weed with delusions of grandeur. It read, "Community Property, Future Picnic Green," in bold letters, with a clip art tree that looked like a child drew it. I pulled into my lot that morning with my surveyor coffee still hot in my hand and stared at it. Charlene claimed the board had voted months ago to convert my lot into shared green space for neighborhood gatherings and quote-unquote community wellness. She said it with the confidence of someone who had never met a county recorder or apparently read a single page of property law. She started taping what she called courtesy notices to the wooden stakes I had carefully set for my foundation layout. The first one said, "No private excavation on shared soil," in red marker. The second one said, "Unauthorized hole. Please refill immediately." My personal favorite was the third one that claimed tree roots are communal organisms and disturbing them harms neighborhood harmony. I stood there reading them in the morning light, wondering if she thought property law was a philosophy seminar taught by someone who failed the bar exam. I pulled my title packet, plat map, and survey documentation like a magician producing rabbits and receipts. I showed her the warranty deed with my name on it, recorded with the county clerk 3 weeks after closing. I showed her the survey with Lot 19 clearly marked as a buildable residential parcel complete with setback lines and utility easements. She squinted at the papers like they were written in ancient hieroglyphics, tilted her head like a confused parrot, then responded by showing up the next morning with binoculars and a tape measure that looked like it came from a hardware store clearance bin. She started photographing my stakes at dawn with a camera that had a flash bright enough to signal aircraft. Then she would move the stakes exactly 6 in random directions, like a raccoon rearranging trash or a toddler helping with furniture. She told neighbors at the mailboxes that I had found the deed online, as if property ownership was something you could download like a coupon or a movie. She emailed the city building department 3 times, claiming I was harassing the green space and disrupting the ecological balance. For the record, my harassment technique involved measuring twice, cutting once, and occasionally standing on my own property looking at it. At 7:40 in the morning on trench day, 2 men in neon vests slapped a red Stopwork City Order sticker on my excavator like they were serving a warrant. Their vest said Civic Services in iron-on letters that were slightly crooked, which I knew for a fact was not a real city department or contractor. One of them muttered something about acting for Charlene and walked away before I could ask for credentials, identification, or literally any proof they had authority. I immediately called the building department. The woman on the phone sounded genuinely confused. Nobody there had issued a stop work order for Lot 19. Nobody there had even heard of SYV Civic Services. She asked if I wanted to file a complaint, and I said yes with enthusiasm. Meanwhile, my surveyor arrived in his truck, took one look at the boundary pins that had mysteriously migrated overnight like they had grown legs, and said flatly that someone had been gardening. His tone suggested this was not his first rodeo with crazy neighbors. We pulled the camera footage from my weatherproof job box that I had installed specifically because I knew Charlene was watching. There she was, at 2:13 in the morning, headlamp blazing like a coal miner on a mission, relocating survey pins like a raccoon with a law degree and a vendetta. She also zip-tied her community property sign to my rebar with about 15 zip ties, because apparently she really wanted it to stay, narrating to herself the entire time about establishing community intent and protecting shared resources. That was when I stopped being polite and started being PDF. I called the county sheriff, the city building inspector, and the county surveyor. I walked all 3 of them through my documentation like I was teaching a class on property rights. I showed them my warranty deed with the raised seal and recording stamp, the recorded plat map where Lot 19 was clearly marked as a private, buildable lot and definitely not a park or green space, and the night vision footage starring Charlene versus survey pins in what could only be described as felony landscaping. The inspector peeled off the fake stopwork sticker with his pocket knife and sighed deeply, like a man who had seen too much nonsense. He said that impersonation of city staff was not recommended, which I felt was the understatement of the year and possibly the decade. The sheriff knocked on Charlene's door with a patient knock of someone who has done this before. She emerged, clutching a binder fat enough to be used as a booster seat, and chirped in a sing-gong voice that this was a designated green space and the community had rights. The county surveyor, a man with 30 years of experience and exactly 0 patience for nonsense, unfolded the original neighborhood plat like it was ancient treasure. He tapped the page with one thick finger and said very clearly, in a voice that could cut glass, that designated greens were parcels of through D on the west side of the development. Lot 19 was a buildable residential lot with recorded setbacks and utility easements. If she wanted it as a park, she needed to buy it at fair market value, like everyone else. Charlene smiled like a cat about to swear the hair was from a dog, and said confidently that they had posted it. As if posting a sign was the same as legal ownership or eminent domain, the deputy wrote, tampering with survey markers in his notebook in very slow, deliberate handwriting that suggested he was building a case. Then he asked about the vests and the stopwork order. Charlene blinked rapidly, like a computer trying to reboot, and I watched her brain scramble for an explanation that would not incriminate her further. Turns out V Civic Services was Charlene's nephew, Derek, and his friend, wearing vests they bought on Amazon for $19 and credentials they printed at home on cardstock. The county attorney did not think it was charming or creative. The HOA insurance company learned about the Midnight Pin relocation ballet and experienced immediate, audible premium anxiety. My lawyer filed for a temporary injunction and damages for delay costs, lost wages, and equipment rental fees that were piling up by the hour. The judge granted it faster than you can say recorded plat, and we had a hearing scheduled within a week. At the emergency hearing, the courtroom was packed with neighbors who had apparently been waiting for someone to finally stand up to Charlene. We played the security footage of Charlene zip-tying her sign to my rebar while narrating to herself about how this was the proper way to establish community intent and preserve neighborhood character. The footage was crystal clear, time-stamped, and completely damning. The judge stared over her glasses with the expression of someone who had seen everything in her 30-year career and was still somehow disappointed by human behavior. She said, very slowly, enunciating every syllable, that the county recorder establishes intent through legal documents and recorded plats, not midnight craft projects with zip ties. The court ordered the HOA to issue a written retraction to all members stating that Lot 19 was private property and always had been, pay my delay costs, which totaled $8,400, plus attorney fees, and replace any disturbed survey markers under a licensed surveyor supervision at their expense. The deputy cited Charlene personally for filing a false city complaint and tampering with surveyor monuments, which under state law were protected markers. Both charges carried fines and potential jail time. The nephew's vests were confiscated as evidence, which is the bureaucratic version of a wedgie and would be Exhibit A if charges were filed. The board held an emergency meeting 2 days later and voted Charlene out as president by a margin of 9-1, with only her sister voting to keep her. She was barred from all compliance activities, stripped of her clipboard privileges, and told she could no longer serve on any committees. The HOA was required to enroll in a very expensive 3-day seminar called Boundaries, not just for fences that cost the neighborhood $12,000. Charlene pled down her criminal charges to a fine of $1,500 and 40 hours of community service after her lawyer begged the prosecutor. The judge, with what I can only describe as poetic justice and possibly a sense of humor, defined her community service as repainting all the neighborhood lot numbers on the curbs under the direct supervision of my surveyor. who showed up to every session with extra survey pins, a clipboard of his own, and a smile that suggested he was enjoying this immensely. Charlene stood in court, her face turning the color of a fire engine, her hands shaking as she gripped the defendant's table. She said in a strangled, trembling voice that this was not fair, that she was only trying to protect the community. The judge closed her folder with a sharp snap, looked directly at Charlene, and replied in a tone that left no room for argument that Fair was following the law and respecting recorded property boundaries, and that this court was now adjourned.